All right. Hello and welcome to 25 Cents, a video game podcast. I am Chris.
And I'm Nick. Each episode will be making the rounds through our four corners: console, PC, Apple, and tabletop, with a focus on games that are great to play if you've got kids.
And you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts or on the web at Goodstuff.network. That wasn't bad. That was pretty well timed, I'd say. Hey, Nick.
Yeah.
Off
Hey,
to a good
Chris.
start. How has your last couple weeks been?
Pretty good. I think kind of gearing up for a little bit of a break here right before back to school. So now I am officially on vacation for a little over a week.
Nice.
Although I need to probably sign out of Slack on my phone or something just to make sure no one tries to reach me through all my away messages and settings and whatnot.
Yeah, that's always a good plan. Yeah, it's coming fast here, the back to school thing. Our oldest is hitting high school, and so I think he's on Wednesday or Thursday, and the other two are on, now we're at the two different school stages of life, which is going to be
sure.
messy. It's messy in the best of times, but obviously COVID being what it is. And so now we just got word yesterday that the elementary schools are requiring masks. The high schools, it's just strongly encouraged. And so which kind of makes sense, I guess, if you're following the logic that everyone's vaccinated, then high schoolers can get vaccinated, elementary can't. So anyways, we'll see how this all goes with the grand experiment of children's lives and things.
Yeah, kind of vibrating through the walls with anxiety in this household, but we're. I think with him being our only, and school being really important to him, we're gonna risk it, but we're relying on, I think it's something like 83% vaccination rate among adults in our immediate area. So
that's good to hear.
yeah, and they are requiring masks, and but it is back to full capacity, and they will be eating lunch spread out, but still all in one big cafeteria. So we'll see. We're taking the risk, and
yeah.
I wish we weren't here, but here we are.
Yeah, exactly. That is, you take some solace in the fact that last year, at least for us anyways, going to school, it was actually relatively good. There was a couple of near cases and classes that isolated, and then everyone came back. So all things considered, considering especially how in advance of it, the sort of fear and worry was, it worked out, at least for our area here. But now it's like, okay, we can do that again. But also, by the way, Delta is really, really bad. So
yeah, yep.
Just how does that going to affect it all? So of course, we can't just have a simple repeat of COVID. It has to be even more uncertainty in different ways. So, but anyways, I think last year around this time we were kind of maybe it was a little earlier. I guess we were like, should we be doing a podcast even right now? But of course, we will carry on having video games and tabletop games as a fun distraction from all of the things. So.
Yes, I think we had a little bit of a schedule hiatus around this time last year, but we're back on a routine, and we actually have a little bit of some video game crosstalk with a newer sibling podcast on the Goodstuff.network.
Mm-hmm.
Click and Flick started up recently.
Yeah, they've got now 5 episodes? I think they're 7. 7 up to, actually. I guess I need to update the website. Speaking of behind on things, but they're up to 7 episodes now, where I like their premise. They take one video game and one movie and then talk about it basically for as long as they need to talk about each segment. So, how have you been listening and enjoying? You're not just so people know.
I really
as
been
part of
enjoying the show.
Sorry, I was just saying, as part of a podcast network, you're not legally obligated to listen to every other show on the podcast network, but it's just strongly encouraged. But yeah, it's kind of like a vaccine mandate. We just strongly encourage it. But
no offense to Kyle and Kenny, but the morning show full uncut feed is often frequent and long enough that I can't listen to every episode in my week, and actually my podcast listening time is down in part because of the number of meetings I have these days. I'm not doing as much solo development time where I can listen and in the background. But Click and Fick, I think I've listened to every episode. It's been interesting because for me, some of the games they've covered are ones I've never played. I think they did Don't Starve Together in episode 3, and that's one of those games that has been in my Steam library for probably, I don't know, almost a decade. It's several years at any rate that I've literally never opened. So it's kind of fun to hear their take on that. But more recently, they covered Mass Effect, which is, I know, one we've talked about when the Legendary Edition came out, and I'm definitely interested in maybe someday playing the whole thing because it's kind of that epic sci-fi. And then their most recent episode 7, they were talking Cozy Grove, which is an Apple Arcade game that I think we've mentioned on the show. My son has played it a little bit. The last I checked in with him, he said, "Oh, I can't wait to upgrade my tent, but it costs 5,000 coin." Now, it being an arcade game, this isn't like in-app purchase nonsense coin, but it is coin you have to accumulate by doing the little quests in the game. So it takes a while. You're gated on advancement, and I think he would rather just kind of build his encampment as he sees fit, rather than actually going through all the parts of the game. But that's almost 8-year-old impatience for you, I suppose.
Yeah, a little understanding, I guess. And so yeah, check out Click and Flick, Goodstuff.network/Click and Flick, or wherever you get your podcast. You can search and find it, I'm sure. And listen along and go subscribe to their show for sure. And the Good Stuff Morning Show, of course, as well. It's a show that's really popular with my kids right now. That's actually what's been occupying a lot of their time, which, not to make it sound like it's a kids show, I know Kyle and Kenny didn't start it as a kids show, that's for sure, just because of my association, I think, with the show and the network. And then we listened to a couple episodes with my oldest one time, and he kind of jumped on it, so then the other two kind of follow suit just because he's listening to it anyways. And so our household is full of morning show audio clips that we repeat to each other and that they use on the show. And I think it's a vastly under listened to show.
I enjoy it every time I do tune in, and actually in recent months, I think during their live recordings, you'll find me and Harold in the Discord listening along live and chatting, because of just our schedules align with when they're recording, which is fun.
Yeah, patreon.com/goodstuff. You can join in the fun if you so desire. They stream it on Thursday evenings, I think, right now, or is it? I think that's when they record live, or Wednesday.
I think so.
I can't remember which day they record. Anyways, it's the Good Stuff Morning Show, recorded in the evening and released. So
we run a very confusing shop over here at the Goodstuff Network.
All right, so on to Console Corner.
So I know you're kind of still in the moratorium, and we can maybe cover that a little bit later. But have you yourself been playing any console games?
I actually haven't. So between a camping trip, a cabin trip, I think, and then the screen time sort of moratorium, like you said, I haven't actually touched a video game even in the last couple of weeks. I don't think. I'm trying to remember if I maybe fired up one on Apple Arcade on my phone just to pass some time, but I don't even know that I did that somehow. It's not that I'm abstaining from screen time. Don't look at my screen time measurements. So I'm going to be listening to a lot of your experiences this episode, I think, as opposed to adding in. But how about you? What's been occupying your console time?
So on the console, not a huge amount. Right after the Olympics ended, I think we were kind of coming down off that, and my son wanted to break out our Mario and Sonic at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games for Switch. So this is it's mini games. You can play them just with the buttons on the controller, but generally speaking, they're more fun with the motion controls of the Joy-Con. We played several different rounds. I think that was last weekend of different stuff. He likes table tennis, the archery game. There's a couple of modes that aren't based on any actual Olympic event, so they're prefixed with Dream. So there's Dream Karate, which is just like kind of a brawl style game, and Dream Skateboarding, which is more like a kart racing style game, except on skateboards with jumps. It's pretty fun. I mean, it's definitely like a commercial tie-in type game, right? But I think the downside, as with many motion control games, is some of the events require really specific sequences and timing of like large arm motions, so they're just kind of not fun. I think the javelin throw is like that. and the gymnastics floor exercises like that. So you have to like, okay, you hold the button and then you start running with your hand, and then you turn the angle and then you fling, right? Like, so that's for javelin throw. And if you
Right.
don't time all that perfectly, you foul or drop it, or it doesn't go very far, right? So I think and you only get one or two tries, like at the real Olympics, so you don't really get a chance to refine it without going through the menus a bunch. So yeah, overall, it's a pretty fun game. It's some of the events are really accessible, and you can kind of jump around between the mini games. And it's kind of silly to be like, oh, Sonic versus Bowser in table tennis is just like that. It's if you know the Sonic and Mario characters, um,
It's a
that can
little.
be fun too. There's also a Tokyo 1964 mode. So Tokyo previously hosted the Summer Olympic Games in 1964, where they go back to some retro like NES and Genesis era graphics for a couple of mini games.
Nice.
Um, yeah, so that was fun. Like there's one where you do the gymnastics vault, and so you hit A when you hit the vault, and then you have to quickly do like up, down, left, right, A to land it properly, right? Depending on
Yeah.
the difficulty. So there's some fun games like that in there. It is definitely a game I'm sure you could find for cheap, given that the Olympics didn't happen in 2020, and it's not like a top tier Mario game.
Yeah. That brings back lots of memories of the Nintendo Track and Field, I think it was, and then Track and Field 2 for
Oh
the
yeah,
NES, like just button mashing and destroying your controller and stuff that happened back then. But even then, like just yeah, like trying to get the optimal combination of controller movements to button at the right time of your character landing, and all kind of very squishy in that 80s video game accuracy level that we played with. And but yeah, that's also funny just seeing Mario and Sonic together. Just thinking about it when you were saying that, like just the branding of those two intellectual properties or whatever coming together without any fanfare really. And now these days, that's back then again would have been, well, not in the 80s, I guess that's before Sonic, but but yeah, having those two things together in one game was like
yeah.
a dream for video game nerds back then.
I forget if I ever talked about it on the show, but a few years ago I read the book Console Wars, which is specifically about uh, Sega versus Nintendo, Sonic versus Mario in the SNES Genesis era. It's a pretty interesting read. Lots of interviews with the executives at the time. How they were like trying to position Sonic as the cool, edgy, like '90s alternative to that boring old Mario, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a fun read. Pretty interesting trivia on that era of video games. I would definitely recommend it.
Cool.
Speaking of games from the 90s, so astoundingly, it is the 25th anniversary of Pokemon. Um, and so they did a Pokemon Presents this past week, announcing several things. So, first, it's also the fifth anniversary of Pokemon Go, the AR game that's pretty popular. That's, it's another Niantic one where you go to specific locations and battle Pokemon and trade them with other people and so forth. They announced a 3D remaster of the Diamond and Pearl games, which I think were originally for DS, Game Boy DS, I want to say. I might have the era wrong. I never played them. But, kind of revisiting a classic Pokemon story. There's a Pokemon Cafe remix, like kind of puzzle collecting game that's going to be coming out on a lot of platforms, including mobile. We might try one. I noticed in the App Store on iOS there's an existing game called Pokemon Cafe, but yeah, it's all in-app purchase style.
Right.
And then finally, the big one is Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is an open world prequel to Diamond and Pearl. So it's set in the same region of the Pokemon world. And this one has certainly taken some cues from Breath of the Wild in terms of the look and style of when you're like running around and seeing like Pokemon from the distance. So most of these I think are coming out early next year for Switch. And yeah, I mean it seems like this. I don't know when my son will be ready for a sort of full length game like this, like a Pokemon length game, in terms of attention span and commitment and so forth, but definitely something we would look at next year.
Yeah. Yeah, I still managed to not abstain. Oh, that's the wrong word, but and I'm not like actively avoiding it either, but just never having ventured down the Pokemon path. And so, seeing the this one, the Legends of Arceus, did you say, is that right? Or Legends Arceus?
I think so.
Yeah. We obviously we should probably just move on because both of us have not a lot of experience with Pokemon to do any justice. But seeing it, even just the gameplay and likening it, that's maybe a good cue of like Breath of the Wild. I can wrap my head around that, and so this visually even just kind of brings me into that world a little bit without being so different or so weird or whatever that I don't. Because I mean, there's the sheer number of Pokemon games that are there, and like you rattled off 3 or 4 of them that I wouldn't have any clue about and where to even begin with. So it just kind of was like, well, that's over. It's like looking at the Lord of the Rings trilogy or whatever, and you're thinking, not bothering.
Well, and I think the Pokemon TV show has like several hundred episodes, right? And then of course the card game has all of the expansions. So I've touched the surface of it, and it's definitely something that has some popularity, like at my son's school and in the neighborhood, at least based on the kids coming into our local game shop to purchase the cards. So yeah, it seems like something that will probably be on our game plate for a while, at least until, I don't know, he graduates into Fortnite or whatever comes after Fortnite.
Yeah. More death.
But yeah, the last little thing in Console Corner is Panic sent iFixit, famed for their Apple hardware teardowns and lots of other hardware teardowns and their repairability guide and tools and so forth. They sent them a Playdate, and so they did a pretty fun little teardown of the Playdate handheld game system console. And I think the takeaway quote from the piece that I really liked was, "If you were obsessing over specs, you've already missed the point." After they rattled off, the resolution of the screen and the amount of memory it has. It's a very lightweight system in terms of power and processing and what it can do, and it's obviously not intended to be a powerful mobile console.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even just the fun of like they sent it to them, they refused to let them pay for it or whatever. They didn't. They sent them a unit without games, which makes sense because they're just tearing apart the hardware, and yeah, getting to see the guts and being willing to, in the very anti-Apple kind of fashion of like, sure, take this apart and show everybody what's inside and let them see what we did and how we built it, and which is very Panic and yeah, very opposite of what Apple would be doing right now with some new device that's on the just being released. So. But yeah, it's neat to see even just some of the parts that like they obviously knowing a bit about and following a bit of the Panic software or Panic hardware, I guess, or Panic company. I don't know what their official title is, but their journey and knowing that they do care about things in a very Apple-like manner, but then obviously have the open, fun spirit of a company that's not burdened by being Apple. And seeing some of the choices they made in hardware and how they would have had to source that and put it all together and figure that out and try different models and things like that and different versions of it. And yeah, it's fascinating to actually see it all kind of ripped apart like that small little thing that they built. So, and it actually looks like it's fairly repairability. Like, well, they say 6 out of 10. I'm guessing like probably just obscure parts. Like a lot of check marks, but basically it's just like one single board.
So yeah, I think that's basically what they're noting is it looks like the battery's pretty replaceable. If something went wrong with one of the chips, you'd basically have to replace the whole board. There's not really any separation of parts there. And then the screen is strongly affixed to the front plate. So probably if you broke your screen, you would have to get a whole screen front plate combo part replacement.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's a little dinged on the repairability, but it looks like if something went wrong with the rechargeable battery, it would be pretty easy to swap that out.
Yeah.
Unlike certain other mobile devices.
Yeah, exactly. And for being the price that it's at, it's, I think, somewhat forgivable too, where it's not like it's a $1,200 phone that you carry on your pocket and pull out every daily. It's a $200 and some little console that you're carrying maybe, at home or whatever. So anyways, on to PC Corner. We forgot to use sound effects, so let's
Put the truck in gear.
We didn't get any feedback off last episode over sound effects, so I'm assuming everybody loved them. So we'll just continue with that as I remember to do them.
I'm sure their silence definitely indicates that. And not that we only have a handful of listeners.
Exactly. Don't tell our sponsors.
Yeah. So I think we mentioned Fortnite earlier as one of those super popular games for your kids, especially with like how it comes up at school. And there was some criticism floating around Epic Games on the internet this past week because their new game mode bears a striking resemblance to a very popular game from last year, Among Us.
Yeah, and actually, like this is one of the things that Fortnite did that my kids heard about through podcasts or an Instagram account maybe or wherever they saw it, that kind of would have drawn our kids back into the game if they were playing it right now. And but we held the line, even though I'm kind of tempted to try it, obviously, with them. But
setting an excellent parenting example.
Yeah, exactly. But did they? I actually didn't read this. Did they actually sue them, or they just have sort of threatened, veiled threats to sue over it? I guess it's not really patented.
I don't even know. I don't think you can even really sue over game mechanics similarity, right? Like there's there's so many clones out there. I mean, I guess you could call it an Among Us like or something.
Yeah.
And I'm not even 100% sure Among Us was like super original. Obviously, it was a version of it that took off. And an implementation of werewolf / mafia type rules from the parlor game world. But yeah, it was more like different developers were kind of just dunking on them on Twitter for. I think it's more of an honor thing than an actual actionable thing.
Well, considering Fortnite itself is a ripoff of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which they actually did sue Epic Games over and then dropped the lawsuit just because I think, like you said, it's a hard thing to like mechanics of a game. It's not really something that you're patenting. Is that the word? Anyway. And so like they don't have a huge case for it. It's just too bad even like an indie company like Among Us or I forget what their name. It's like, where am I? I just saw it here. Inner Sloth. It's too bad like Fortnite or Epic Games or whoever, just like they do tie-ins with like LeBron James in the game and whatever Star Wars thing is going on is in the game. They could have probably reached out and just done like a tie-in and actually made it kind of a fun thing for the community to be a part of.
Right, like literally Among Us in Fortnite.
Yeah. Just the Fortnite style of it, which is exactly what they do with all their other crossovers, with like Street Fighter, and there's tons of games they've done crossovers with. So, but for whatever reason, they decided not to, and here we are. So,
well, it's interesting too to tie in with our Apple conversations around Epic and Apple and the App Store rules and the 30% cut and all that, right? Because Epic is very much trying to play the role there of, the medium-sized developers standing up for the little guy developer to the big bad corporation, and then they turn around and kind of just like quietly stomp on an indie developer. Maybe not in a way that's, like I said, actually not allowed, but definitely feels a little. Rude.
Yeah.
Jumping on a trend that they didn't create, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're the Goliath in this situation or whatever, and
exactly
stomping on the little guy. I saw a Quake remaster you'd put in the links, and I remember hearing about this, that it's now on Game Pass too, which is basically like a remaster of the original Quake. And I haven't tried this yet. I'm assuming it's on Xbox Game Pass. It's always confusing to me with the Microsoft stuff, whether Game Pass means it's on Xbox and Windows PC, or if it's just on Game Pass if you're on Windows. And so, but I'm guessing this one is actually just Windows, not actual Xbox Game Pass. But at any rate, it's one interesting note is if you own the original Quake on Steam from way back, you'll get the update for free, or this new version remaster is $10, which I'm kind of honestly tempted just because I spent so much time playing the original Quake, but I also don't really love gory first-person shooters the way I used to either. So I think that's where, and like this was one of the games. Doom before it, but Quake was definitely one of the games I played a ton of and kind of locked me into that first-person view. And then Fortnite, actually, I just finally have gotten around the idea of it's the third-person perspective, right? Do I have the terms, or did I get it backwards? I think it's got it right. Where you actually see your character running around while you're shooting. And at first, when I started playing Fortnite, it was just awful. I couldn't get my head around that. It didn't make sense to me, etc. But now that kind of feels more normal. And looking at Quake and those style of games actually feels a little weird. But I'm sure it would come back just like riding a bicycle. How about, did you play Quake and stuff back in the day?
So I think just in terms of the era of computers I had access to, and I think, so we were on a Mac by that point, and as you know, gaming on a Mac in the 90s was a rough prospect for anything big name outside of the very cool shareware world that was big on Mac at the time.
Not like now, where there's just tons of games on the Mac.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're just waiting for all of those iOS, Catalyst, Swift UI ports, right? But yeah, so I think I definitely played Quake at friends a little bit, but then our second Mac that we got in like 99-ish era, I played a lot of Quake 3 Arena on, as well as Unreal Tournament.
Yeah.
So speaking of epic games, so that was, I think that was more the generation of first-person shooter I played. Obviously fit in, the Bungie marathon series in there a little bit, or at least the shareware version where you could play the first few levels. And I think I got a copy of Wolfenstein at some point. So those are a little bit earlier era than Quake. But yeah, played Quake at a friend's. And it's funny because I think Quake is maybe one of the first sort of weird cross-media tie-in cases, right? Because they had the 9-inch nails, right? Like they had like Trent Reznor. The logo was in the game as the ammo for the one weapon, right? So it's like you were mentioning for Fortnite, like LeBron showing up in the game as a character, right? But like here was an edgy rocker showing up in your like cool metal first person shooter, super gory for the 90s game.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that's where like they did relicense it or whatever they had to do, I guess, to get that soundtrack back for this remaster. So that's pretty cool. I think it would sound and feel right, anyways. So, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I don't even know if I can play. I guess I could boot camp into Windows if I really wanted to try it out and see. I don't think I have it. I don't think I ever bought it through Steam. I was well beyond that by that point. But yeah, that's bringing back lots of memories.
Yeah. Now is some of the stuff with like the PC version of Game Pass, is that stuff you can do through the xCloud streaming service where it's not actually running locally, but you're streaming the game?
Yeah, some of that is, and I haven't tried it again since they officially launched. I was playing around with it when it was in beta. And really it's just like the optimal experience for those games. It still feels like on the 50-inch TV as opposed to on my iPhone screen. And so I'm never this actually happens to us every summer where our bandwidth or our data usage on our cellular devices, because we have a shared plan with my wife and I, the summer when we go camping or whatever away from home is when we actually run up against the limits of I think we have a 12 gig shared plan or whatever. And so then we're like, we have to sort of negotiate which album we're going to actually download if we forgot to download some music or whatever. And so then, yeah, definitely not playing too much Game Pass from the campsites, even if the cellular connectivity is up to the snuff, the bandwidth or the data usage is not. So, but yeah, I haven't. I'll have to try that out here in the fall. I keep going back and forth on outfitting my office with like looking if I ever came across an Xbox Series X. That's a new one, right? I always mix them up, anyways. And picking one up for my office here so that we can actually play. I can play games with my kids, at home here if we're going to be stuck at home.
Like multiplayer, non-local.
Multiplayer. Yeah. But I know that in the Good Stuff folks, there's lots of people in the Good Stuff world that feel like they're on PlayStation. So I sometimes think, well, it'd be easier to like multiplayer on a PlayStation. But anyways, either way, I can't find either of them up here anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, then then going back forth to the like outfitting like a streaming or a gaming PC to play some of this stuff would actually be nice as well. And the Xbox obviously still isn't quite have feature parity for playing a lot of the games, although it's probably getting very close these days. So anyways, all that to say, screen time, let's segue into quickly screen time, summertime follow-up.
Yeah. How's the experiment going? or
it's
not even really experiment, the
yeah,
plan.
no, it's amazing how like one of those things that like the kids lose their minds over when you announce that, hey, we're going to take a break from screen time this summer. I was going to say screaming. We did take a break from screaming, maybe.
Should also take a break from that. Yeah.
But then like they quickly fall out of the as addictive as, especially it's kind of like from my oldest on down, in order of addictiveness to video games and stuff, and they kind of quickly fall away from it and forget and pick up other things. Like it really is kind of like just like any sort of addiction almost, where like if you play Fortnite every day, you kind of want more and more and more, and then once you kind of it leaves your system, your blood system or whatever, you kind of forget about it, and you're able to like pick up a board game or whatever that you would otherwise be sort of obsessing over. How can I get back onto the Xbox? And so the only hiccup has happened where like just recently now we came back from being away, and some cousins message about wanting to play Fortnite together, or there's another one. It's like a battle royale kind of fighting one. I think I tried it once with them, but anyways, it's like kind of wrestling fighting game and multiplayer game, and wanting to do that. And so then we're kind of torn between, do we hold our line or do we let them have social time with cousins? But then it opens the door to then kind of like getting that drug back in their system for another round of detox that we have to kind of do. And so in this case, it worked out that we just said no, and we were doing other things anyways. But it's actually been really good for the most part. And kind of like every so often you have to shoo them off. My oldest has a Kindle device with, he bought Marvel Unlimited, the comic book. So that's kind of the gray area of like books on a digital device, I think are still okay, but often it's a gateway into what other things you might be doing on the device. And so, not that we're against, like, obviously anybody listening to this knows that we're not like, or we're not anti-screen, anti-video game by any means. We have way too many devices to pretend to be that, but just in terms of like a bit of a Sabbath or a break from the stuff to clear the heads.
Right.
So. Yeah.
Yeah. On our end, we don't have anything so formal, but we are kind of slowly adjusting to the reality of what the school year will look like, which includes, you're not going to have screen time in the morning because we just have to eat and get ready and go, right? And so there won't be this kind of like chill, and so I think it's a mix of, as I've alluded to over many episodes, playing different games on the family iPad. Many arcade games, and kind of doing kind of art and music. He just kind of noodles around in like GarageBand or Paper by 53 or similar sort of apps. And those, that always feels very creative. Like, sure, he could pick up some colored pencils and paper as well, but yeah, it's clearly a creative outlet, and the fact that it's a screen is not really a concern. And then reading. So we don't really have any ebooks ourselves, but the library app lets you reserve and then check out and download ebooks pretty easily. And so that's actually been one where, especially when the library was physically closed, or at least our immediate local branch was, due to COVID restrictions, that was a great gap filler there in terms of having a variety of books rotating through. The only challenge we had is that the unlike when we would go to the library, whether the school library or the city library, there wasn't always a chance for one of us to filter on content. And it's not like he was picking anything age inappropriate, but like, he's a sensitive kid, and he's grabbed a few things where he was reading it, and then he kind of tells us like, oh, I don't like this, and we're like, well, you can just return it. You don't have to like finish reading it just because you started it, right? And so that's been an interesting area of lessons on sort of, well, what do you do when you encounter something that you realize just isn't for you, or is maybe a little scary, or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where having the multiple kid, like, so one kid downloads a book that's for them, but someone else picks it up, and all of a sudden our youngest was like, what's I forget how she worded it, but like, what does it mean when you're kissing with tongues? We're like, wait, what? And like, obviously, if you've ever been 14, you've probably read things that are like that, and you're not like shocked at the idea. But an 8-year-old is also, it's not like that's first.
It's at least novel.
Yeah. It's not like the first thing you're like hoping they're going to pick up and ask questions about. I mean, we talked about it. It's not like we were like shaming her for asking the question, but still, it's just kind of like, oh, right. You just kind of forget some of the as often happens with oldest to youngest or whatever, however many kids are in between. But the youngest is just like she's watched all the Marvel movies and stuff and had way more food experiences, stayed up later, etc. All those things than our oldest ever did at this age. And yeah, so just trying to navigate some of that stuff and is always fun. So.
It was certainly, I mean, obviously we have just the one, but that was certainly the case with my sister and I as kids, right? You know, I'm 2.5 years older, but like basically I would get access to, you know, like the next movie rating and then very shortly after she would as well, because it was just easier to all be at the same kind of point. And at the same time, to be perfectly honest, I mean, she was better able to handle that kind of thing than I was. Like I was definitely the one who was much more sensitive to media, in whether it was books or not.
Yeah. Anyways, that's Kid Corner of sorts. An unofficial corner that runs through all the corners.
Yeah, well, I mean,
corner.
Yeah, we threw it there in between what PC and Apple Corner. I mean, maybe it's the center of the room is the kids, because exactly. we are two dads with a podcast. So
exactly, it comes back to that. So moving on to Apple Corner, take a ship. Little Seattle, isn't that like, you know, the harbor?
Yeah, we get
the
ferries will have to run the foghorn whenever the marine layer drops in, so we can hear that at our house, as well as when the cruise ships to Alaska leave the cruise terminal. We can usually hear those. And they'll sometimes do a little music as well. Anyway, so listener Andrew, a friend of mine from college, noticed that. So Jetpack Joyride, which we talked about a couple episodes ago. So Jetpack Joyride was an iOS game for a long time and had a tvOS version, right? Like they ported it to tvOS. Jetpack Joyride Plus, the Apple Arcade game, does not run on Apple TV. And like what? First of all, the whole point of Apple Arcade, I thought, was to be on all 4 platforms, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then that like a game that used to run and then gets updated to integrate with Arcade then can't run on one of your platforms. The platform that is in theory like where you want to play a lot of games on a TV. It's astounding. I don't know how that happens. I don't know if it's on the developer or Apple or Apple's libraries or what, but
it feels almost like one of those things. Well, even like as a parent, right? You have like the rules when you first set up. You're like, everyone has to do this, and then this, and then this, and then you get to play the video game or whatever. And then by 2 weeks down the road, you've kind of forgotten about one of the rules because you forgot, and the kids have managed to sneak in and not do it or whatever anymore. And eventually, like you go a month later, and all of a sudden you realize, oh shoot, we forgot about the requirement that they have to clean out the dishwasher before they get to screen time. And it kind of feels a little bit like that, where like initially Apple was like hard line, you have to have it on all 3 platforms. And now, like, whatever, it's a year and a half later or whatever, and they're like, oh, that's a lot of work, and we're just busy over here with, iOS or whatever. So just ship it. We'll get to that eventually or whatever. And it's just not, they want the marketing folks want to be able to push the game and, et cetera. So
I think just ship it is probably a big factor, right? Which is like, hey, we need to keep this kind of release treadmill going, right? Where there's like always new games every couple of weeks on the Arcade platform. And if a developer is coming back to you and being like, look, there's some weird issue on tvOS, we're not going to be able to build it without another 3 months, or the controls, right? Like our play testers say it's terrible. Like I can imagine Apple being like, yeah, okay, don't put away your laundry today. We'll fix it later, right? Or maybe never, exactly. Right? Because they also kind of know where the long-term plans are for games on tvOS.
I wonder if, I'm just looking at Good Sudoku Plus, which is the next one we were talking about. It also isn't available on Apple TV, which that one makes sense. It's a little more awkward to play on an Apple TV than on the phone, and the controls for that would be a lot more involved. But are there actually Apple TV? Are some of the Plus games, the reissues, are any of them available? I guess on Apple Arcade. I don't have them in front of me to go through them all, but
yeah. So I would have to check. I'll take that as a homework assignment to see which of the classics and Plus games, most of which were iPad or iPhone releases only in the past. Not Jetpack Joyride, but for sure these other ones, and which ones are actually available through Arcade on the TV is an interesting question. Like you said, the ones that were designed for touch-centric interface, like I imagine you could try to bolt on, some sort of controller interface where you're like scrolling through the Sudoku board and then like angle down on the one stick makes it a 9 or something. But it wouldn't be a good play experience.
No, no. Actually, that reminds me now, just because you had asked, and I said I didn't play anything, but I did actually download WordWeb. I think I must have marked it as a
Oh
game
yeah.
to try out, and so then I got a notification. I think maybe while we were camping, that's probably where some of our bandwidth went. Sorry, Sue. It's like a crossword Scrabble kind of game. Scrabble, I guess, is probably a better way of describing it. Type of game with a bit of a crossword.
Yeah,
vibe.
more like Scrabble.
Yeah, and it's fun. I didn't ever play it long enough to sort of really dig into it too far. But it's a good like brain tease, pass a bit of time if you need to, kind of game, and with a, like I said, like a fun kind of spin on Scrabble. That's solo, obviously playable, and so one of my friends is playing it. According to that's you. According to
Yes.
just looking on the App Store.
Yeah, I actually forgot to put this in the notes, but I did try it briefly.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it
what'd you
grabbed
think?
me, but like I definitely was kind of like drawn more to going back to Good Sudoku Plus, let's say, or something else. But it was fun. It was a fun little. I guess it's one of those games where I felt like I wanted to be able to pass it to Sue, my wife, to play the same hand, let's say, or something maybe. And I don't know. We just didn't, or I don't know if that's even really doable with that game, but.
Yeah, so I haven't gotten into it too much. It does seem like a game that could benefit from some sort of more turn-based multiplayer mode or even a collaborative mode. I think if you both did the daily challenge, it would be the same.
Right. That's true.
But yeah, it has a couple of different game modes with different goals and what you do with the set of words or what the limitations are. I think as a longtime Scrabble player, my biggest frustration was that you could not craft you couldn't do multiple crossings, right? Like you could only ever add your current word to an existing word, and you couldn't set up like short adjacencies where words like run up against each other and you get your like 2 or 3 letter words going, which is
Right.
like key to winning Scrabble and scoring lots of points is those multiple crossings. So that's just not supported in the way they've designed the game.
Although
So
it
it was a
looks
little bit of
like
a frustration.
they must have, because I'm just seeing. Or I guess no, that would be maybe added after the fact. It looks like there's some that, and just in their little video that's playing as we're talking, like Jellyfish has a bunch of, but I'm guessing that's different letters or different words added singularly, not at one point there where they added that word going all the way across. So yeah,
Right.
anyways.
Well, or even, let's say you have a word in place that starts with F and you have another word that ends in O, you can't butt them against each other to make of, like you
Yeah.
have to play crossing one of your played words, which it makes sense as a restriction. It's just different enough from Scrabble that it was throwing me a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'll give it a few more chances. I would say the daily challenge, which is sort of a play as many words as you can before you run out of legal plays, actually takes a little long for a daily challenge. Like if you were really serious about it, you can get up into, several dozen words probably before the board fills up, and maybe not several dozen, but you'd be playing for 20 minutes maybe to get that far, and that always feels like a little bit too long for a mobile game that you would want to play. You get the morning notification to say, hey, play the next level, and those feel like something that needs to be more sub 5-minute territory, I would say.
Yeah. And it's they also introduced a bunch of different modes, I guess, too, which, like, for me, it's kind of like I just want to keep it. I almost wanted to keep it simple, so that there's just the game mode I go into play, and I guess that's where I do appreciate the daily challenges that games are adding. A lot of the Apple Arcade games are adding, like Sudoku has that, and a lot of these kind of puzzle games have that kind of just as a way of like, it incentivizes me to go play it. And even what's the one? Mini Metro has that as well.
Yes.
It's kind of like your challenge that everyone else is doing the same one today. Come in and try it out and see how you do. And it's a very easy way to like have a bit more intentionality to why you're going to play the game, as opposed to just, I'm bored, I'm going to go play the game.
Right. Well, and it's nice too because it's kind of bounded, right? It's not like you're gonna start playing, Sudoku and play 8 puzzles in a row and suddenly an hour is gone, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, exactly.
you can drop in, do the daily challenge, and feel like you enjoyed the game for the day, and that's all you need.
Yeah. How about Tetris Beat was the other new one of the other new ones that was added. I didn't ever try this one out. but Tetris
Yeah,
seems to
so
be
tried it
popular.
briefly. My son has actually played it a little bit more than I have. So there's three kind of different game modes. So one is the beat game mode where you have to you're playing pretty typical Tetris in terms of turning pieces and dropping them, right? But you have to do the moves to the beat if you want to score bonuses. Um, However, what I found was that the gesture controls, at least on the phone, are a little flaky. And that's kind of always been the case, is that Tetris is a game I loved that just does not fit for touch controls.
Hmm.
They do support overlay controls, so I need to try that. And it looked like they support controllers. I'm also really curious what it works, how it works on the big screen, right? In terms of with a controller on the Apple TV. There is a mode. There's another beat mode that's you tap to the beat, but the position of there's two positions of the piece that it'll go to, like rotated, and so you're just having to decide, do I want it here or here, and then tap to the beat.
Oh
So that
yeah.
one I found was a little easier on touch because then you're not trying to like swipe or tap to spin. And I was finding those were getting misinterpreted, so the wrong thing was happening. And then there's a classic Tetris mode, which is just rotate and drop the pieces, no on the beat bonus requirement. It's got some built-in music, kind of generally like a dance type soundtrack to keep the beat going for the beat modes. It gets a little repetitive. The loops are pretty short, so that was a downside. I kind of wish they could do some sort of Apple Music tie-in where they could like BPM match
Yeah.
any song in your library to play against. Um, but yeah, I think this is one I'll come back to. Give it a little more time. I mean, Tetris was we had the DOS version of Tetris way back on
Yeah.
on the family PC, and you know. I mean, we just played that so much. My dad and I would have high score contests,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, and
and
that's
then
funny.
yeah,
It's looking at the specs even on it. It's a single player mode only for Apple TV, which I feel like maybe again this is just my family, so every family's different. But like having played Tetris, I forget which one it was on the Switch. There's like a funky Tetris that.
Tetris 99,
There's that one, but then there's another one that we played, or Tetris like actual game, like a
Puyo Puyo Tetris.
yes, that's one. I think we've even talked about it on the show here. Um,
Yes.
which was fun with like 2, 3, I forgot how many people we played with, on one screen, and you can kind of see how each other's doing, and your game affects the other people, etc., or not. And so that's a fun way to, I feel like, for the modern spin on Tetris beyond just like sitting with your Game Boy playing Tetris. But I noticed they have spatial audio support for AirPod Pro and AirPod Max on on the phone, so might be worth trying out just for that experience, I guess, just to have a surround sound Tetris experience. But
Yeah, so I have a couple bits of homework to try to report back for next episode on the Apple Corner.
yeah. All right, let's move on to Tabletop Corner, and then we'll be on our way. Oh,
Oh no, what game are we playing? Please do not play tabletop games and drive.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
just
That's the one perk, one of the benefits of
public.
tabletop. It's very
Yes.
hard to do.
So I imagine with your screen time, you alluded to playing more board games. So what are the sort of board and card games, tabletop games that have been coming into the rotation?
Yeah, I thought you had mentioned here, and I forgot that they had pulled this out, but Clue made a return, which like we have an old version of Clue that they pull out every so often. I don't. It's not like a retro version. It actually is like an old version of Clue, and so that one. I always find that one kind of like it's funny now because I think our kids have kind of figured out some shortcuts in terms of like recognizing when someone else is asking that you can probably mark certain things off and things like that. So the game actually goes fairly quick. It used to be a really long kind of like, oh, I rolled a one, I rolled a one, I rolled a one. You're kind of like making your way slowly around the board trying to like figure it out. But we've played this time when we played, it definitely was going a little quicker. So that's one. And then Dutch Blitz actually is a game we were talking about before the show here that is really popular amongst friends up here. And I don't know how worldwide or how well known it is, but it's basically like a counting game, kind of like solitaire-esque. And I was just reading actually the creator of it was someone he was an optometrist who thought the game would help his children easily learn about colors and numbers, because there's basically 4 colors and then cards up to 10, and you have to just build piles up to 10, and you're trying to get rid of your pile, and you're all kind of playing on a collective group of piles of 1 to 10 that you build up, and then the cards on the back have there's 4 different symbols, and you just count up your points basically, and that's how you play the game more or less. So
Yeah, so I've never heard of Dutch Blitz, but the mechanics sound very much like Flinch, which is a similar one where you have your pile that you're trying to empty out, and everyone's playing piles up to 15, and that was one where my family had an old set, and we've actually in the last year, I think since the pandemic started, we got a new set just for us to play. Yeah, it's a fun one, and that's one that I grew up playing a lot. My parents also, or my family growing up, we also had a copy of Clue, and like you said, the downside of Clue, right, is how long it takes to move between locations to actually get new clues. But I always enjoyed my complicated note-taking system that I developed, where I'd put an initial if my dad passed a card to my sister, and I knew which cards were already somewhere, but I didn't know that card, so it had to be one of these, and it couldn't have been one of the right. I got too into it. I'm not sure if it actually helped me win, but it was fun.
Yeah. You're almost like Sudoku level note-taking kind of whatever.
Yeah.
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 That works.
Logic puzzles.
How about you with tabletop stuff? What's been going on in your world?
Yeah, so my son's been expressing more interest in some of the sort of quote unquote grown up tabletop games that we've had in our collection for a long time. So he'd learned Dominion a while back, but I was basically kind of guiding him through every turn, and now I think he's kind of starting to understand the strategy of it, and why you'd want certain combinations of cards in your deck. It's a deck building game, so that's where the strategy comes in. I still give him some advice or suggestions here and there when he's not sure what to do on a turn, but he's actually been able to build what's called an engine deck and beat me a couple of times. Nice. So that's fun. He's kind of graduating a little bit there. And then we've also been learning Race for the Galaxy, which is probably even more complicated than Dominion, just because there's so many different cards in play in a given game, whereas Dominion has many combinations of cards, but there's only 10 10 sets of cards out on any given round or any given game. So that's been fun too, and I think that's one where there's all the weird symbols for if the production phase is called and you have a blue world, then you draw a card for every good produced. It's one of those German or Euro games, which I love, but are definitely a steep learning curve. So
yeah,
the way we did it, kind of getting into the strategy yesterday, I think it was, is I kind of sorted the deck by the cards that work well together. Here's the alien strategy, and here's the military strategy, and here's the production strategy. So he could kind of see if you have these cards, you're probably going to want to try to get these other cards and play them together, because you'll get more combo points. So that's been where we are with the tabletop, and I'm sure we have several days of tabletop coming up with vacation here before school starts.
Yeah, nice. And we're similar here with the last week of school, and then no screen time, and then actually it's been rainy and kind of cold, and so definitely the board game kind of option. Aside from, we took a quick media break this morning to watch the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer, as well as Eternals trailer, which we missed while we were gone. So a little bit of movie fun there for you. But and then I forgot about Settlers of Catan also made a comeback as well this summer too.
That's a hit,
perennial kind of classic that comes out, and actually works really well camping too. We brought it camping and played it as long as it's not too windy, obviously, or wherever you happen to be. We just take the games out of the box. It's kind of sacrilegious maybe for some folks, but we take the games out of the box, put them in a plastic bag, kind of with elastics, and put it all together that way. Then it makes it much easier to bring along on a trip. But
that's a good thought.
That's my wife's
no travel edition required.
No, exactly. But anyways, that's probably enough. We're just approaching an hour, and probably need to get back to work. It sounds like your phone's buzzing with excitement. exciting things? Oh, actually, no, you're on holidays. That's maybe actually
yeah,
is
yeah.
exciting
So
things.
today's my first day off, but yeah, new message on Slack. Oh yeah, 7 notifications. So someone's ignoring my away messages. I gotta log out of everything and
Yeah,
tell them to go away,
yeah,
because
exactly.
I'm on vacation.
All right.
Uh,
So we'll let you get back to
I'm
that.
very professional, but vacation is my time.
Yeah, exactly. You can find us on Twitter at 25C Arcade. If you'd like to reach us there, send your thoughts, comments, suggestions for future games and things we should check out if we're missing out on something. But in the meantime, thank you for listening to 25 Cents, our video game podcast. You can find me on Twitter at iChris.
And you can find me on Twitter and almost everywhere else as UltraNerd. That's NURD.
And be sure to find 25 Cents wherever you listen to podcasts, Goodstuff.network, of course, and then our Patreon, Goodstuff, or patreon.com/Goodstuff. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
All right.
That was good. A little bit. I didn't think we actually had that much in there, but that was a longer one.
That's usually how it seems like if we don't think it's going to go long, it'll go long, and then
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll be curious if you do get into Quake, because I think, what age difference wise, that was probably more right in your wheelhouse, the original Quake, than it would have been for me.
Yeah, like I'm trying to remember. I remember Quake 3 Arena was, I think, more when I was already out of high school or out of high school. I can't remember when. I guess I could just Google when it came out. But
I think that was like 99 or 2000 maybe.
it's Quake 3 Arena.
But I definitely remember trying to play Unreal Tournament over dial-up, which was just laughable.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 99. Yeah, definitely out of high school then. So,
Yeah.
but whereas Quake originally came out 96. Oh, I thought it was earlier than that. I guess.
I think Doom is 94, maybe 93. I do remember one of my friend's birthdays, his dad had a lab at the university with like actual network computers, right? And so one of his grad students had like put Doom on all the lab computers. And so for my friend's birthday, we literally just went to his dad's office to play a network game of Doom. And at the time that was like, whoa, you can do like 2 players on different computers.
Yeah.
Was just, yeah. Anyway.
Oh, Doom was 93 is when it came out originally. And I totally did that. Like my dad was a financial advisor and had an office and had like an IBM PC Junior computer or whatever. I don't remember what it was exactly. And then eventually got some clones, but I would go there on like a Friday night with some friends. I don't know how or why he allowed me to do this. He didn't know what we were doing, I'm sure, because I'm like reconfiguring networking and trying to like get the whatever it was to connect to each other. And so we could play network games with like 3 or 4 people in this office that's normally used for like, financial advice and meeting with clients and all that kind of stuff. And here we're sitting in there with like, I'm sure like a bag of nachos and trying to network these computers and with headphones on or whatever and yelling at each other. And anyway, classic.
Yeah, I
fun.
remember for some reason sometimes had to like tag along with my mom to her office on like a Saturday, or maybe it was like a school day off or something. And we weren't allowed to modify anything, but obviously every PC in the place had Solitaire and Reversi on it, so I'd end up playing those for a long time.
Yeah. Did you ever? Was Wolfenstein? That was before you would have.
Yeah, so that was one where you may
92.
have seen the infamous zip drive picture. So sometime after I got that zip drive, which I think was more like 95, I had it at a friend's, and like they had the full copy of Wolfenstein for Mac, so I like just put it on a zip drive, because it could fit, I don't know, it was probably like 20-30 megs. And so I put it on a zip disk and brought it home and played it a while. And then I think my dad found it and didn't want me playing it, so I had to delete it. But I think before that happened, I'm pretty sure he stayed up late playing it and then deleted it.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering the timeline. I had to double check on that story.
Yeah. Well, that one and like Duke Nukem was the other one. That was 91 that it came out. And like those, that one had more like definitely more like the sexual jokes, innuendos, and or outright misogyny, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
In hindsight. But with my parents had any
No,
idea
I
what
played.
we were doing.
I played way more because my dad worked at my school as the like computer math resource teacher and librarian, and so I was there like after school or during the summers, and that was like a network computer lab. But there wasn't. It was all the like Mac edutainment games. So
Yeah.
Oregon Trail, Number Munchers. I mean, I was running around setting the high score on like 20 computers across the whole school over the summer.
Nice. Yeah.
Anyway,
Fun times. That's where I feel like sometimes when people are like, "Oh, video games are so awful now, and our kids are being whatever," and like certainly Call of Duty is very gory, graphic, realistic, kind of crazy. But when you look at like Duke Nukem and Wolfenstein and Quake, even like those are and Doom, like pretty. Like if you, I spent
I
like
mean,
5 hours playing that on a LAN game, until midnight or whatever. Like that's not awesome things
yeah.
for your
I
brain
mean,
either.
that's I forget if it was like Wolfenstein or Doom, but I mean that's why there's the ESRB, right? Like
Yeah.
the industry was basically like, we're about to get regulated out of existence by the U.S. Congress. We better come up with a rating system, or we're in
Yeah.
trouble.
Exactly.
Like, um, yeah. So
Well, it's like
I don't know. It's
the tweet when we watched Indiana Jones and which one? Uh,
uh,
I'm blanking. Too many
Raiders of the
words.
Lost Ark.
Yeah, the first one, right?
Yeah,
Raiders. Yeah, and yeah, how that one's rated PG, or I think it was PG 13 maybe.
yeah. It's PG.
Yeah,
It's
which
not a
is
modern PG. It's
no,
it's a very different.
it's a different
Um,
time.
yeah, yeah. I think maybe we can talk about this on a future show, but like I think there's an argument to be made that a violent mechanic is arguably more psychologically impacting than like violent or gory graphics, right?
Yeah,
Like so the even if it's like really cartoony and but if you're like constantly if destroying things like that maybe is more. I don't know, I vaguely remember reading something about that it's not, everyone fixates on like the gore, but it's actually like what are you doing in the game that matters more.
yeah, like a Grand Theft Auto thing where it's like maybe even Grand Theft Auto 4 or whatever, where it wasn't like super graphic, but you were going around dragging people out of cars and being, curb stomping them and whatever and stuff,
Yeah,
versus like, yeah, a more graphic, far away, violent kind of thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's all. I mean, I remember trying to make the argument for still being able to watch Star Trek, where it's like, well, they're not guns, they're phasers. They don't, they don't show anything. They just fall over, right?
Yeah.
Like, why it was okay, but
Yeah.
well, I mean, they're still like shooting each other. Yeah. Anyway,
Yep.
maybe
Yep.
maybe a topic for another show.
Yeah.
Um,
All right.
well,
For now, I'll stick to Dutch Blitz. That's safe.
yeah, yeah. I think I've got some card games in my future this afternoon. Well, and actually, playing some D&D with high school friends
Oh,
briefly.
nice. Nice.
I'm gonna fit that in later. Yeah, so I guess we're back on in 2 weeks, and hopefully the start of the school year is uneventful, is what we are cheering for.
Yeah, exactly. So that's actually what works so good. So we won't record next week because and that's when our school is launching, anyways. And then 2 weeks from
Yeah,
then.
our first day is next Wednesday. Frustratingly, we don't find out who his teacher is until this Friday, so it's like very last minute. But
Oh yeah, we actually don't find out for elementary, anyways. We don't find out until the day of school starting. So it's,
oh, really?
I
Wow.
mean, they're a little further. I know, like kindergarten, it's nice to know, or grade one for sure. It's nice to know, like just to prepare them for what they're going into, for sure. But yeah, for
Right.
our older kids, anyways, they are younger but older than your kids.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
they kind of just go in blind. But I mean, they've been in the school for a few years, so they kind of have an idea of who's there and who it could be. But yeah,
Sure.
so anyways, well, all the best. We'll be obviously chatting in Discord. I guess I could turn
Yep.
off the stream too. Thanks for watching, whoever's out there, if you're out there.